He succeeds me as Duke of Cornwall and takes on the responsibilities for the Duchy of Cornwall, which I have undertaken for more than 5 decades.
The palace doors swung open, but this time every eye moved past Camilla. Catherine stepped forward in white silk and diamonds, calm yet untouchable, while the crowd erupted before a single royal word was spoken. Even the senior royals appeared stunned as cameras captured the moment history shifted forever. Across the room, Camilla's family reportedly stood frozen, their smiles fading as the future queen commanded the monarchy with one breathtaking appearance. But was this simply royal tradition, or a silent message that changed everything inside the palace walls forever? And before we continue, tell us this in the comments. Do you think Catherine's first appearance as queen was a genuine royal moment, or a powerful statement aimed directly at Camilla's family? Also, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss any royal stories. Catherine's silent move leaves the palace frozen. The cameras were ready for another carefully rehearsed royal entrance, but what unfolded inside Buckingham Palace felt far more unsettling. Catherine stepped into the room with an energy that instantly changed the atmosphere, calm yet impossibly deliberate, offering no lingering smiles, no comforting glance toward the section where Camilla's family had gathered. Instead, she moved with quiet precision, as though every step had already been decided long before the doors opened. Palace aides later admitted that the silence which followed was unlike anything they had witnessed in years. It was not dramatic chaos. It was the colder shock of realizing the monarchy was beginning to move in a completely different direction. Only months earlier, during a relaxed public outing in Norfolk, Catherine had surprised crowds by appearing unusually carefree, laughing openly, riding a scooter through the grounds, and joking with staff while sipping cider beside local guests. Many dismissed the moment as harmless fun, but royal insiders would later whisper that the appearance revealed something far more important. Behind the warmth was a woman already preparing for a larger role, studying the institution around her and carefully deciding how the next era would look once the balance inside the palace finally shifted. By early 2025, those private calculations reportedly became visible behind closed doors. Courtiers who had served since the late reign of Queen Elizabeth II described Catherine's approach as intensely focused, almost strategic, with one senior insider claiming she seemed 3 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. The message became impossible to ignore during a high-profile gathering at Buckingham Palace when members of Camilla's family reportedly waited for the familiar warmth they had grown used to during King Charles's reign. It never arrived. For years, their presence at royal occasions had appeared secure, strengthened by Charles's personal support and carefully managed public appearances. Yet Catherine's composed refusal to acknowledge the expected royal routine reportedly left several guests visibly uncomfortable. Invitations, influence, and informal access suddenly no longer felt guaranteed. One observer later described the reaction in only a single word: speechless, not because voices were raised, but because everyone present understood that the future monarchy would not operate by the old rules anymore. When Catherine stepped forward with calm authority, the entire atmosphere inside royal circles shifted without a single public confrontation or harsh word. What truly changed in those silent seconds, and how did Camilla's family suddenly realize that their long-held influence around the monarchy was beginning to slip away in ways they could no longer control? Stay tuned as the next developments unfold. Catherine's rise changes everything. The moment Catherine stepped forward with calm authority, the atmosphere inside royal circles changed almost instantly. There were no dramatic speeches, no public arguments, and no need for harsh words. Yet those watching closely understood exactly what had happened. In only a few silent seconds, Camilla's family realized the world they had comfortably known around the monarchy was beginning to disappear. The invitations, private access, and quiet influence they had enjoyed for years suddenly no longer felt secure. This was no longer the era of old arrangements. The balance of power had shifted, and everyone in the palace could feel it. For years, Camilla had carefully guided her family into the center of royal life. Her son Tom moved through elite gatherings with ease, while Laura and other relatives appeared increasingly accepted within royal circles that once seemed impossible to enter. Behind palace walls, many believed those connections would continue far into the future because King Charles had personally welcomed them into that space. But by early 2025, after Charles reduced several royal responsibilities during his health struggles, insiders quietly admitted something important had changed. The authority that once protected those privileges was slowly passing into Catherine's hands. What stunned observers was not anger from Catherine, but distance. During one major royal appearance, palace insiders noticed how naturally she commanded attention while carefully avoiding unnecessary interaction with Camilla's side of the family. That single moment reportedly triggered deep concern behind closed doors. According to royal sources, hurried phone calls followed almost immediately. Trusted contacts were approached, alliances quietly reconsidered, and questions spread rapidly through private conversations inside London and Windsor. Who still held influence? Which palace aides remained loyal? And perhaps most unsettling of all, how much access would survive once Catherine's role became even stronger? Those closest to Camilla allegedly feared this outcome long before it became visible in public. Some believed that once Catherine fully stepped into the future role of queen, the entire structure surrounding Camilla's relatives could quietly fade away. Unlike previous years, tradition offered them no protection. Nothing had ever been formally guaranteed. Every privilege depended on personal favor, and personal favor can disappear faster than royal titles appear. By the end of that unforgettable week, one truth reportedly settled heavily across royal circles. Under Charles, Camilla's family had become part of the royal picture, but under Catherine, they risked becoming little more than a fading detail in the background of a monarchy already preparing for its next chapter. Something shifted inside the palace long before the public fully understood what was happening, as King Charles's cancer diagnosis in early 2024 quietly reshaped the flow of royal duties. But what truly triggered Catherine's gradual rise into heavier responsibilities? And how did this unseen transition redefine control within the monarchy behind closed doors? Let's uncover what changed. The quiet rise of a new crown. Something shifted inside the palace long before any public notice made sense of it. In early 2024, Buckingham Palace confirmed King Charles's cancer diagnosis, and the atmosphere inside royal duty corridors changed in subtle but firm ways. Without fanfare, Catherine began to take on more of the responsibilities that once rested on the king, stepping into roles that demanded constant attention. Engagements were quietly reshuffled, decisions filtered through her office, and meetings that Charles could not attend were managed with steady control. By mid-2024, insiders suggested that this was not temporary relief work, but a structured handover already in motion behind closed doors. A well-placed royal source noted that months of preparation had quietly positioned Catherine as the stabilizing force of the monarchy. So when she appeared in leading moments, it no longer felt like adjustment, but like recognition of what had already been happening. Those close to Camilla's family reportedly fell silent, reading the shift not as a ceremony, but as confirmation of a new center of power. There was no sudden announcement in tone or behavior, only a gradual settling of authority that few outside the palace fully understood. By the time public appearances made the situation clearer, Catherine was already performing the role with quiet certainty and firm presence. What looked like a new era to outsiders was, inside palace walls, simply the formal acknowledgement of a reality long in place. Transition had already happened quietly, and its meaning became visible when it could no longer be ignored. What truly connects the king's shocking cancer diagnosis in early 2026 to the quiet but intense pressure surrounding Prince Andrew's position at Royal Lodge? Could these two separate struggles be pieces of a deeper shift within the monarchy that is unfolding behind palace walls, reshaping power, trust, and royal relationships in ways the public has yet to fully understand? Let's find out. The silent shift inside Buckingham Palace. From Buckingham Palace comes breaking news that the king has been diagnosed with cancer in early 2026, a revelation that quietly unsettled the entire royal household while public attention shifted between tradition and a changing inner balance of power inside the palace walls. In another corner of the royal story, a different struggle was unfolding around Royal Lodge near Forest Lodge, where the decision to push Prince Andrew out of public proximity reportedly became a turning point in private relations between senior royals. Catherine took the lead in advocating for Andrew's removal, a move insiders viewed as decisive and, to some, unilateral within palace circles. Camilla, after decades of rebuilding her role following years of scrutiny, reportedly felt edged out of decisions she once expected to help shape. Her frustration grew from a longer pattern, not a single moment, but a rising sense that Catherine represented a new center of authority within the monarchy. Long before the king's diagnosis was made public, Camilla was already managing quiet tensions over the royal family's future direction. A further disagreement emerged over the York family, with Charles leaning toward public reconciliation, while Catherine preferred a more cautious approach pending health reviews. This divide between tradition and renewal left Camilla increasingly isolated despite her position as queen consort. Once expected to step softly into history, she instead remained deeply involved in a shifting balance of influence, where each decision reflected deeper struggles over the monarchy's next chapter. In private, Camilla was described as feeling increasingly sidelined as Catherine's influence expanded across both family and institution. Still, she continued her duties alongside King Charles, believing stability required restraint, even as frustrations grew behind closed doors. The palace stood quietly divided between loyalty, experience, and a rising new order reshaping power at Buckingham Palace and beyond, as history shifted in subtle but lasting ways. Inside Buckingham Palace, power was never shouted. It was shown in subtle gestures and quiet positioning. But what truly happened during that 2025 state visit between Princess Catherine and Camilla, and why did insiders later claim that a single banquet revealed tensions the public completely missed? Let's unravel the details. The tiara signal. Inside the gilded corridors of Buckingham Palace, appearances shifted power more than words ever could. What unfolded during a state visit in London earlier in 2025 was not seen as loud conflict, but as careful positioning between Princess Catherine and Camilla. Some insiders later pointed to that week as the moment everything tightened inside the royal household. The state banquet that followed became the center of attention, not because of speeches, but because of small signals that were read like messages. Catherine moved through the room with ease, greeting guests and leading conversations, while Camilla watched every detail closely. A tiara choice worn that night at Windsor Castle became the most discussed symbol inside palace walls. To some, it was just tradition, but to others, it felt like a message about the future balance of influence. After the event, communication between the two sides turned cold, with staff quietly adjusting schedules and separating duties to avoid unnecessary contact. Meetings once planned jointly were reshuffled across different wings of the palace. In private discussions, aides described the mood as the most distant it had been in years. Behind closed doors, the struggle was not only about personal dislike, but about influence in a shrinking royal stage. Each side refused to step back, convinced that public image now shaped real authority more than titles alone. Camilla reportedly felt that Catherine's growing presence at official events was shifting attention away from established roles, while Catherine remained firm in her approach and less willing to soften situations as she once did. Earlier hints of tension had already appeared during informal gatherings in Norfolk and later in London receptions, where polite smiles masked growing distance. Even small protocol choices began to carry heavier meaning than expected. In the end, Catherine stepped away from mediating disputes, leaving both sides to manage their own paths in an atmosphere that remained carefully controlled yet deeply strained. What once seemed manageable now feels like a quiet contest of influence that neither side is ready to lose in silence behind polished doors across London and Windsor corridors remain unresolved still. A more refined vision of monarchy is quietly taking shape, moving away from rigid ceremony toward a closer, more relatable connection with the public. But what exactly lies behind Catherine, Princess of Wales' push to redefine royal duty? And how could her South Africa remarks signal a deeper shift in tradition than anyone expected? Let's find out. The quiet reinvention of the crown. A refined vision of monarchy is being shaped in quiet confidence, one that leans away from heavy ceremony and toward a simpler, more direct connection with the public. In London and beyond, discussions around royal tradition have shifted after Catherine, Princess of Wales, signaled an intent to reframe how duty is performed in a modern age. Speaking in South Africa during a recent visit, she emphasized that change is not a threat to heritage, but a necessary step to keep it alive. According to royal editor Rebecca English, plans being discussed include shorter ceremonies, fewer displays of excess, and a careful review of long-standing practices once seen as untouchable. The aim is not to erase tradition, but to refine it, removing what feels outdated while preserving what still carries meaning. Fewer ceremonial events, more purposeful engagements, and a smaller but more focused royal household form the core of this approach. At the center of this shift, Catherine is described as operating with calm strategy, favoring thoughtful decisions over emotional reaction. Insiders suggest she is neither quick to forget nor easy to sway, and that her approach may gradually reshape expectations within the royal circle. This careful balance of accessibility and authority has sparked quiet unease in some traditional corners of the institution, with even long-standing figures around Queen Camilla closely observing the changes. Rather than a dramatic break, the direction being drawn is a quiet restructuring, where visibility is reduced but intention is sharpened. Recent reflections on leadership, influence, and responsibility point toward a monarchy becoming less about spectacle and more about substance. What emerges is a controlled transformation shaped not by sudden rupture, but by steady, deliberate recalibration, as Catherine's influence continues to grow and the wider royal landscape adjusts to a slower, more strategic pace. But what caused the Andrew affair to evolve into such a defining test of Catherine's growing influence within the monarchy? How did a sensitive family issue turn into a decisive push for Prince Andrew's removal from public duties? And why did this stance quietly challenge King Charles's preference for patience and unity behind palace doors? Now let's uncover what really shaped that turning point. Catherine and the new face of royal power. Few expected the Andrew affair to become the clearest window into how Catherine would shape the future of the monarchy. What began as a sensitive family problem quickly turned into a defining test of authority inside the palace. Catherine stepped into the situation with a calm but firm approach, choosing clear action over delay. While King Charles leaned toward patience and keeping family ties steady, Catherine pressed for a complete removal of Prince Andrew from public duties and influence. The debate grew sharper as discussions turned to his residence at Royal Lodge in Windsor, where she supported firm relocation measures that others saw as too harsh. Camilla, however, viewed the push as an unwanted shift in influence, a sign that the balance inside the palace was changing. Even concerns around Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie were pulled into the wider disagreement, as Catherine preferred a quieter public role for the York branch while Charles favored gradual reintegration. By late 2025 and into 2026, royal observers noted how this approach revealed a new style of leadership built on discipline and control. Catherine's thinking was simple: protect the institution first, even if it creates discomfort within the family. That position created distance between personal loyalty and institutional duty, a gap that others found difficult to accept. Yet supporters argue it reflects a modern monarchy that responds quickly to scandal and public pressure. Critics warn it risks appearing cold, especially when decisions affect close relatives. Still, Catherine's influence continued to grow as her decisions shaped outcomes that earlier would have taken months of discussion. Her method echoed a stricter form of leadership last seen in the final years of Queen Elizabeth II, though even then softened by compromise. Catherine appears less willing to soften hard choices. For her, stability comes from action, not hesitation, and that belief has become the defining feature of this new direction for the royal household. Insiders say this shift will continue shaping decisions across the palace for years ahead, especially as public expectations for clarity and accountability keep rising in ways few expected just a few years. Kate, once seen as a supporting figure, has now emerged as a central force shaping a new royal direction, moving from the sidelines into the core of decision-making. But what exactly changed behind closed doors in those weeks of secret planning? And how did Catherine rise to stand beside the monarchy's new center of power? Let's uncover the intriguing details. The quiet architecture of a new monarchy. Kate, once seen as a supporting figure, has quietly become the central force behind a new era in the royal house. In this reshaped order, Catherine, Princess of Wales, stands not at the edge but at the core of decisions that guide the future of the monarchy. Long before public appearances at Buckingham Palace or formal events in London, strategic planning rooms had already mapped out a new direction. Insiders describe weeks of careful preparation, where roles were redefined and lines of authority rearranged, placing Catherine beside the new center of power rather than behind it. Prince William had once been expected to lead this transition, yet in this reimagined structure, his role is quietly shifted toward shared responsibility, with Catherine taking the symbolic and strategic weight of sovereign authority. Her middle-class background gives her a rare sense of balance, allowing her to connect with life outside palace walls, something royal commentators often say shapes her decisions inside the institution. Those close to the Wales household describe her as a steady hand during private discussions, especially as health challenges tested her resolve, yet never reduced her influence. After a period of treatment and recovery, Catherine returned to public life with a quiet strength that deepened public respect and reinforced her role in maintaining unity within a family facing ongoing scrutiny. At major appearances, including a notable London event in May 2026, she moved in step with the new sovereign presence, projecting calm coordination rather than performance. Observers noted that her presence never overpowered the moment, yet it quietly defined it, especially as key decisions had already been finalized in private palace meetings. Within those decisions, royal alliances were subtly restructured, with increased focus on Catherine and her closest circle, while others saw their formal roles reduced. From Buckingham Palace, one source described a carefully balanced system where communication lines were streamlined and authority clearly defined, leaving little room for external influence to shape decisions once made. This shift was felt most sharply around Queen Camilla as a new balance of power emerged, positioning Catherine as a central figure of continuity while the institution moved forward with unified direction, closing long-standing gaps in leadership and uncertainty. A quiet shift is unfolding across palace corridors as the monarchy moves toward a new era under Queen Catherine and Prince George as heir apparent. But what does this transformation truly mean for the crown's future? And how will a modernized coronation reshape traditions that have defined Britain for centuries? Let's find out. A crown rewritten in plain light. Across palace corridors and public squares, a different future for the crown quietly takes shape. One that feels less like distant ceremony and more like a living institution adjusting to a new age. At its center stands Catherine, stepping into sovereignty as Queen Catherine, with her eldest son George becoming heir apparent, the line of succession steadying into a new chapter. A coronation already being prepared is expected to break from heavy tradition, leaning toward a shorter, simpler service in London that speaks to modern Britain rather than an empire of the past. Rather than dismantling everything, many long-standing customs remain, including trooping the color, still marking the monarch's official birthday after more than 260 years, though now reshaped for relevance over spectacle. Catherine is described as a traditionalist at heart, yet determined to steer the institution toward transparency and clear purpose, where ceremony serves meaning instead of mystique. Insiders suggest that decisions around Camilla's role remain unresolved, with Charles once expressing a wish for continued palace access, though final authority now rests with Catherine, whose leadership is expected to prioritize institutional stability above personal ties. Speculation also surrounds earlier discussions about Harry and Meghan, where some royal commentators believe Catherine may avoid any dramatic moves on titles, choosing instead to focus on long-term credibility rather than public disputes. The transformation is not about erasing tradition, but reshaping it, balancing continuity with a quieter, more accountable style of monarchy that reflects a changing Britain. In this unfolding era, the crown's strength is measured less by grandeur and more by trust, as Catherine prepares to define a reign that seeks unity across generations while keeping the monarchy visibly connected to everyday life in places like London and beyond. While much remains uncertain, the direction is clear: a quieter, modern crown shaped by Catherine's judgment, where history is respected but no longer allowed to overshadow accountability, and where every decision is weighed against public expectation, national service, and the evolving identity of Britain in the 21st century, with a deliberate focus on renewal and unity, moving forward together, always stronger. The moment everything shifted left Camilla's family in stunned silence as royal power began to realign in ways no one expected. But what triggered this sudden reset? And how did Catherine step into a role that began reshaping decisions once controlled under King Charles across Windsor and beyond? The quiet reordering of the crown. The moment the world realized everything had changed. Camilla's family stood in silence, aware that what unfolded was not tradition continuing, but a complete reset of royal power. In Windsor and across London, old certainties dissolved, as Catherine, now guiding the monarchy with precise focus, began shaping decisions that once moved slowly under King Charles. What once took weeks of careful discussion in earlier years is now settled within hours, especially after the transitions that followed 2023. By 2025, long-standing arrangements inside the royal household were being reviewed, with a blunt clarity that unsettled many senior aides, who described the atmosphere as respectful but unsentimental. Legacy and loyalty were no longer enough to secure position or privilege. Instead, every invitation, every role, and every protocol was measured against a single question: does it strengthen the future structure Catherine is building for the institution? For Camilla's extended family, this shift cut deeply. Their influence had once grown from proximity, from warm ties, and from quiet access to Charles's inner circle across Clarence House. But Catherine's leadership does not rely on sentiment. It depends on visible results, clear accountability, and public value. In this new order, modest contributions no longer guarantee protection or status. Inside Wales' household operations, decisions that once felt predictable now carry a different weight, with Catherine setting expectations that reshape long-standing traditions. Even gatherings in Windsor and engagements once seen as routine now reflect a sharper direction. Camilla herself has been noticeably absent from key public appearances alongside the new leadership since early 2026, and the silence around her position has deepened uncertainty. Within palace rooms where she was once consulted, conversations now continue without her input, quietly and deliberately behind closed doors, marking a transition that few within the royal circle can ignore. Across London and Windsor, observers quietly note how quickly influence has shifted, leaving old alliances uncertain as a new disciplined order takes hold under Catherine's direction. Few expected the change to be this swift, yet its impact is now felt in every corridor of royal decision-making across the palace and surrounding institutions today still. So, what do you think caused Catherine's shocking first appearance as queen, which left Camilla's family furious and the world stunned? We'd like to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe.